It was the 12th of May in the year 1945, deep within the treacherous confines of a muddy trench carved into the unforgiving Burmese jungle. The air hung heavy with the oppressive humidity of the monsoon season, which had only just begun to unleash its torrential rains upon the landscape, turning the earth into a slick, viscous quagmire that clung to boots and uniforms like a living entity. 3 Gurkha riflemen, fierce warriors hailing from the rugged hills of Nepal, renowned throughout the British Empire for their unyielding bravery and lethal prowess, crouched low in the enveloping darkness, their senses heightened to a razor-sharp edge as they strained to discern the subtle, ominous sounds emanating from the dense undergrowth surrounding them. The jungle was alive with the nocturnal symphony of insects chirping, leaves rustling in the faint breeze, and the distant calls of exotic birds. But beneath this natural cacophony lurked the stealthy movements of at least 200 Japanese soldiers, creeping forward with the disciplined precision of predators stalking their prey. These enemy troops, part of the Imperial Japanese Army, were desperate remnants of a once formidable force now retreating through the hostile terrain of Burma, driven by a fanatical code of Bushido that demanded victory or death. Rifleman Lakhiman Gurung, a compact figure standing at just 4 feet 11 inches tall and aged 27 years, gripped his standard-issue Lee Enfield rifle with a steady resolve that belied his diminutive stature. The Lee Enfield, a bolt-action rifle chambered in .303 British caliber, was the backbone of British infantry armament during World War II, known for its reliability, rapid rate of fire when operated by skilled hands, and its ability to deliver accurate shots up to 500 yards in trained marksmanship. Gurung's position was the most forward outpost of the entire British defensive line, a solitary bulwark that served as the linchpin to the whole perimeter. If this trench fell to the advancing Japanese, the consequences would be catastrophic. The enemy would exploit the breach to roll up the exposed flank, encircling and slaughtering 2 entire companies of surrounded Gurkhas, potentially unraveling the Allied push in this sector of the Burma campaign. The stakes were immense, as this engagement was part of the broader Operation Extended Capital, aimed at recapturing central Burma and severing Japanese supply lines, a critical theatre in the Allied effort to reclaim Southeast Asia from Axis control. At precisely 1:20 in the morning, the fragile veil of silence was shattered as the first grenades began to rain down upon the trench. These were Japanese Type 97 hand grenades, compact explosive devices with a 4 to 5 second fuse, designed for fragmentation and capable of inflicting devastating wounds within a 10-meter radius. Gurung, his eyes piercing the gloom, watched intently as the first grenade arced gracefully through the inky blackness, its metallic form glinting momentarily in the faint moonlight before landing just outside the lip of his trench. Without a moment's hesitation, drawing upon the rigorous training he had undergone as a Gurkha recruit, he scooped it up with his right hand, his dominant hand, and hurled it back toward the source of the threat. The grenade detonated mid-flight, its explosion ripping through the night like a thunderclap, illuminating the jungle canopy for a fleeting split second, and revealing the silhouettes of dozens of Japanese soldiers surging forward, their bayonets fixed and their faces contorted in grim determination. Undeterred, another grenade tumbled into the trench itself, rolling perilously close to Gurung and his comrades. Again, he grabbed it swiftly, his movements fluid and instinctive, and lobbed it toward the attackers. This one exploded in mid-air, sending shards of hot metal scattering in all directions, momentarily halting the enemy's advance as screams of pain echoed from the underbrush. But the onslaught was relentless. A third grenade landed directly at Gurung's feet, its fuse hissing ominously like a venomous serpent. He reached down once more, his fingers closing around the deadly ordnance, intent on repeating his defiant act. This time, however, fate intervened cruelly. The grenade detonated prematurely in his grasp. The blast was cataclysmic, a searing eruption of force that tore off the fingers of his right hand in a gruesome spray of blood and bone fragments. Shrapnel from the fragmentation sleeve embedded itself deeply into his face, obliterating his right eye in a burst of agony that would have felled a lesser man instantly. Burns scorched his right arm, chest and legs, the heat from the explosion charring his uniform and skin alike. The concussive wave threw him backward against the trench wall, and the same deadly shards wounded the other two Gurkhas sharing the position, rendering them incapacitated and bleeding profusely. Gurung was now a vision of horrific injury, bleeding copiously from multiple wounds, half-blind with only his left eye functioning amidst the swelling and blood, and missing most of his right hand, which dangled as a mangled, useless stump. His body screamed in protest, every nerve ending alight with excruciating pain. Yet the 200 Japanese soldiers continued their charge, their war cries, "Banzai!" piercing the night as they fired rifles and submachine guns, lobbing more grenades in a bid to overwhelm the isolated outpost. In the face of such overwhelming odds, any rational soldier might have considered surrender or accepted inevitable death as the only outcomes. But Lakhiman Gurung was no ordinary soldier. He was a Gurkha, bound by an ancient code of honor that echoed through generations. Kafar hunu banda marnu ramro, better to die than be a coward. Defying logic, pain, and the very limits of human endurance, he seized his Lee Enfield rifle with his left hand, his non-dominant hand, and began to exact a terrible toll on the attackers. For the next 4 hours, a span of time that stretched into an eternity of unrelenting combat, Gurung held that trench single-handedly. Operating the bolt-action mechanism of the rifle was a Herculean task. Under normal circumstances, requiring the right hand to cycle the bolt after each shot to eject the spent cartridge and chamber a fresh round from the 10-round magazine. With his right hand destroyed, he improvised ingeniously, bracing the rifle against the trench parapet or his left hip, using his left hand to manipulate the bolt, load cartridges by feel in the pitch darkness, aim with his remaining eye, and fire with deadly accuracy. Each shot was a deliberate act of defiance, the rifle's report cracking through the jungle like a whip, felling Japanese soldiers who dared to approach. All the while he screamed challenges at the enemy in his native Gurkhali tongue, taunting them to "come and fight a Gurkha," a rallying cry that not only bolstered his own resolve, but also sowed confusion and fear among the attackers, who expected to find only corpses or cowering defenders in the trench. When the first faint light of dawn finally pierced the canopy on May 13, 1945, the Japanese forces, exhausted and decimated, retreated into the shadows of the jungle, leaving behind a scene of carnage that defied belief. 31 enemy bodies lay sprawled in grotesque poses directly in front of Gurung's position, 31 soldiers killed by one man wielding a rifle with one hand. A man who, according to every established rule of warfare and human physiology, should have succumbed to his injuries within the first minute of the engagement. This extraordinary feat was not merely a testament to individual bravery, but a pivotal moment that preserved the integrity of the British line, preventing a flank collapse that could have led to hundreds of Allied casualties and delayed the advance toward Rangoon. This is the untold, or rather, underappreciated story of what many historians regard as the most incredible one-man stand in the annals of World War II. History. It spans from the remote mountain villages of Nepal, where a young boy named Lakhiman Gurung joined the British Indian Army to escape the grinding cycle of poverty, to the brutal quagmires of the Burma campaign, where the Imperial Japanese Army learned the hard way what transpired when they assaulted a Gurkha who simply refused to yield to death. From the instant a grenade ravaged his hand to the 4 harrowing hours of infernal combat that culminated in his earning the Victoria Cross, the highest military decoration for valour in the British and Commonwealth forces, this narrative encapsulates how one humble rifleman demonstrated that true courage requires neither 2 hands nor perfect vision. It demands only an unbreakable refusal to quit, even when the odds are insurmountably stacked against survival. To fully appreciate the magnitude of Gurung's heroism, one must delve into the historical and cultural context that shaped him. Nepal, in December 1917, was a kingdom nestled in the Himalayas, a land of towering peaks, terraced rice fields, and isolated villages where life revolved around subsistence agriculture and ancient traditions. Lakhiman Gurung was born on the 30th of that month in the tiny village of Dahakani, located in the Chitwan district, a region characterized by its lush valleys and proximity to the Chitwan National Park, though in those days it was simply a rural outpost west of Kathmandu, the capital often misspelled as Kathmandu in early Western accounts due to phonetic interpretations. His father, Partiman Gurung, toiled on a modest plot of land, scratching out a meagre existence from the soil that barely yielded enough to sustain the family through the harsh winters and monsoon floods. Life in the Nepalese mountains was synonymous with poverty, relentless hard labor, and scant opportunities for advancement. For young men like Gurung, the paths forward were starkly limited. Either inherit the family farm and perpetuate the cycle of hardship, or seek fortune elsewhere, often by enlisting in the British Indian Army as Gurkhas, the legendary soldiers from Nepal who had pledged their allegiance to the British Crown since the Anglo-Nepalese War of 1814-1816. The Gurkhas, derived from the hill town of Gurkha, where the unifying king Prithvi Narayan Shah originated, had forged a reputation that struck terror into the hearts of enemies across the expanse of the British Empire. These warriors were fearless, impeccably disciplined, and armed with the iconic curved kukri knife, a versatile blade measuring 12 to 18 inches long, with a broad, weighted tip ideal for chopping, slashing, or thrusting in close-quarters combat. Every Gurkha carried one, honed to razor sharpness, and mastered its use through rigorous training that emphasized decapitating strikes or disemboweling foes in a single fluid motion. British commanders prized them above nearly all other infantry units for their loyalty, resilience, and combat effectiveness. German soldiers during both World Wars learned to dread encounters with Gurkha regiments, often spreading tales of silent night raids where the kukri claimed lives without a sound. Similarly, Japanese troops in Burma would come to fear these Nepalese fighters, whose motto encapsulated their ethos: "Better to die than be a coward." This phrase was not mere rhetoric. It was a guiding principle ingrained in their cultural identity, drawing from Hindu and Buddhist influences that emphasized dharma, duty, and karma, action, where dishonor was worse than death. Gurung grew up immersed in these legends, hearing tales of Gurkha heroes from villages like his own who had earned medals and glory fighting for Britain in distant lands such as India, Afghanistan, and the trenches of France during World War I. The army represented more than just escape. It offered steady pay, often several times what a farmer could earn, respect within the community, and a pathway out of generational poverty. However, enlisting was no easy feat. It required passing a brutal selection process that tested physical endurance, mental fortitude, and combat aptitude. Recruits endured grueling marches over mountainous terrain, hand-to-hand, combat drills and marksmanship trials, all while carrying heavy loads. Moreover, there was a strict minimum height requirement of 5 feet tall, a standard designed to ensure soldiers could handle the rigors of infantry life and operate equipment effectively. Gurung, measuring only 4 feet 11 inches, fell short of this benchmark. Under peacetime conditions, he would have been summarily rejected, his dreams dashed before they could take flight. But the circumstances in 1940 were far from normal. The world was engulfed in the flames of World War II, with Nazi Germany dominating much of Europe following the fall of France in June, and Imperial Japan poised to expand its aggressive empire across Asia, culminating in the attack on Pearl Harbor the following year. Britain, facing a dire shortage of manpower to defend its far-flung colonies and combat Axis forces on multiple fronts, desperately needed soldiers. Recruitment standards were quietly relaxed, particularly for proven units like the Gurkhas, whose valor had been demonstrated time and again. Thus, in December 1940, at the age of 23, Gurung made the arduous journey on foot to the nearest British recruitment station in Nepal. He was accepted despite his height, a decision that would alter the course of history.